So I want to get straight to CBS News chief Washington correspondent John Dickerson, also the host of Face the Nation. He is in Washington. He joins us, as well as CBS News political director Steve Chaggaris here in New York with me. Kevin Sheridan is in Washington. He is a Republican strategist and the former communications director for Paul Ryan during his 2012 vice presidential bid. John, to you first. There were several questions regarding Mr. Scaramucci's qualifications in this new role, given that his background is in finance and not necessarily in politics. But given that Mr. Trump, the president, seems to admire greatly military men and people who have been successful in finance as he has been, does this bode well for a more seamless interaction between his communications folks and the president of the United States?
Well, what we've seen in this administration in particular, but also in previous administrations, is if you are going to deal with the message, and particularly a president who believes, as all of them do, that they are the best messenger for an administration, you need a tight connection with the president. And in this case, with this president, as you say, he admires people who are self-made and who have been successful. Anthony Scaramucci certainly fits that role. And his biggest job will actually be restraining the president in certain instances and then convincing him to say things in other instances. The president is the top communicator in this White House and also is basically the communications director. And so that kind of personal relationship and that kind of ability to come to the job as your own man are probably the best qualifications in this White House. The huge challenge is going to be the boring job, essentially, of having to basically keep things on track, because in Washington in particular, which is very much different than a campaign and very much different than in the business world, you have to kind of be very patient, go through some of the compulsory exercises of Washington, because you're not just trying to convince your base, you're trying to convince lawmakers. You're trying to give people space to do things, which sometimes means making yourself not look so great for the moment so that somebody else can take the glory. There are a lot of strange ways that Washington works. And while this administration ran and was successful in winning to blow up Washington, one of the challenges the president has had is that you cannot blow it up entirely. There is another branch over there in Congress that is right now looking like they're not going to be able to pass health care reform, which reflects poorly on the president. And also, as good as the president was in selling himself as a candidate, he has been not very good at selling health care reform. It is deeply unpopular, even within his own base. And for a president whose key skill that he brought to the job was as a marketer, he's not been a very successful marketer of this health care plan. So a communications director has to deal with all of that, the personality of the president and trying to sell his policies, which is a lot different than just selling simply a candidate.
John Dickerson, as always, we greatly appreciate your insight and analysis, and we'll look for more on Face the Nation this Sunday. John, thanks.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, let's talk to Steve Chaggaris. He's with me here in the desk. Steve, first impressions, Anthony Scaramucci, very smooth up there, not angry, not blustering, and I'm not criticizing Sean Spicer, but he had a more contentious relationship with the press. This is day one, obviously, but he seems comfortable in talking to reporters.
Not to sound like Anthony Scaramucci, but he's super excited.
Super excited.
I don't know. I want to just, what John just said during this special, he said the one thing he didn't hear, and I agree with him on this, what is the message? What is the agenda moving forward? He talked a lot about
he loves Donald Trump.
How he loves Donald Trump, how people love Donald Trump. We're just not seeing that. Okay, if that's the fact, if that's a fact, which polling suggests it might not necessarily be a fact that a majority of people love Donald Trump, but if it is a fact, then what do? It's not just about loving Donald Trump, and it's not just about hearing more from Donald Trump. It's about hearing what his agenda is and what he's going to do as president moving forward, how he's going to work with Congress to get his agenda passed. And I just wonder what is going through Scaramucci's head in terms of thinking about how he's going to craft a message for this president. I think there's one thing that's really standing in the way, and it's the fact that Donald Trump is not going to put down his phone. He's not going to stop tweeting. Twitter does not lend itself to an organized, orderly, crafted message, especially when you're getting up first thing in the morning and just typing away. John also mentioned something about Reagan. Reagan had a voice. He was a great communicator. They all wanted Reagan's voice to be out there more often. That's sort of what Scaramucci is saying, but the difference is, with Reagan had a lot of people crafting that message. He had a news cycle that was a lot slower than this one. They could spend some time figuring out how to roll out what they wanted to roll out and get that president, who was a great communicator, to communicate that to people. With Trump, things are moving so quickly. He is in control of a lot of this news cycle, mainly because he is creating the news, whether it's by Twitter or whether it's by not being able to handle different crises, or in their own way coming up with their own agenda. It's all mixed together into a giant news cycle that is going really, really fast. And it's going to be really interesting to watch Scaramucci, who's had zero experience controlling that, try to get that under control with this president and in this White House.
Kevin, that is one of the questions that many people had at the podium there when Mr. Scaramucci was addressing reporters, which is how he will manage the president. In other words, there are some, most notably the president's supporters, his base, that argue that Donald Trump is the best messenger for his vision for the United States of America, and that to try and put a veneer of Washington, for lack of a better word, Washington communication strategy on his message is only stifling the president of the United States. But the question then becomes, well, is Scaramucci just willing to let the president do as Steve suggested? Tweet when he wants, meet with reporters when he wants, say what he wants, and then have to put out the fires after?
Well, he's off to a really good start, I think, today, and a couple of those things are just the fact that he's great on TV, he's very smooth, unflappable. The president definitely appreciates that. I'm sure he was watching, and I'm sure he was impressed, and he's a success in business. So I think he's got, two big legs up on getting to the president and being able to influence him. I think, though, he comes from a place where he doesn't actually think that the president's tweeting and the president's stray voltage kind of communication style is necessarily a bad thing, and that's up for debate, really. Honestly, we don't know until there's another election. Maybe in 2018 we'll find out, in 2020 we'll find out again, and if he can get some things done, whether or not it actually matters, and whether or not his tweeting is really hurting him, or if it's just kind of something we haven't seen before. Because look, people said these same things. We were all talking about this all through 2016 and said the same things. And we thought each time he got out there and tweeted something, it was going to be the end of him and it was going to doom him. And he somehow just kept pushing on, and he won. So, look, I think it's an unknowable thing to know yet, and I think 2018 and 2020 will figure it out for us. I do think he's off to a very good start, and I think he's got a chance to be a really good communications director.
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to what I was saying earlier, Steve. He presents well. He was smooth. We know that the president at one point suggested to somebody that he didn't like the way Sean Spicer's suits fit, right? And you got a guy who's a Wall Street guy who, is well put together. He does have a little bit of history with President Trump. He once called him a hack during when President Trump was running, but he apologized. He said to the president. Here's my question, and it was something that has not gotten picked up a lot on. There was a question to Sarah Huckabee Sanders about who she reports to. Does she report in to Mr. Scaramucci, or do they both report in to Reince Priebus, the chief of staff? And I thought that was kind of interesting because the spotlight is on Reince Priebus right now.
Sure. And I think it was pretty clear that not answering that question definitively probably says a little bit about what's going on with Reince Priebus. But not to speculate there, I do want to mention that we talk about how Scaramucci did a great job behind the podium today, but he's not going to be doing that job every day.
That's right.
He'll be one spokesperson for the president, but he's not going to be the main spokesperson for the president. That job traditionally is somebody, again, who crafts the message for the president, which is a big picture job. I'm sure he'll be put out on the shows a lot because he is very good on camera. But how are they going to, again, craft this message? How are they going to implement it? How are they going to get the president to stay disciplined on it? Or is that not part of the plan? That's what traditionally would happen in this situation. Maybe that's not part of the plan. Maybe the plan is let the president talk and let him talk. But that just means I think there are going to be continual fires to put out, as you put it.
Because he was asked, they asked him about the president's claim that 3 million people voted in 3 million illegal folks voted in the election, and he said, well, if the president said it, there must be some degree of truth. If that's the plan, which is to just back up everything the president says through Twitter or through random comments, then we kind of get a sense.
I don't think Anthony Scaramucci is going to be hired to be the fact check guy. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what they're that's not what they're putting those people out there for. So I don't think Donald Trump cares that he's getting those kinds of questions, and I don't think he cares that Scaramucci's not answering those questions. That's not what he's been hired to do. But traditionally, that job is to keep the president in line in terms of a message, and we'll see how that goes.
Be looking forward to that. And don't forget, you can watch Face the Nation this weekend. Moderator John Dickerson will talk with Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine and Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming. That is this Sunday at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on CBSN. We are going to take a quick break. Lots to get to on the other side of that break. Stick around. There's a whole lot more news happening.